Welcome, dreamer. You've arrived just in time for tonight's letter. This is Letters Before Sleep, a place where stories arrive gently, like moonlight through a window, delivered from far-off times, quiet corners, and places just beyond memory. Each letter is written for you, a whisper from another world, wrapped in soft words, slow breaths, and peaceful thoughts. Let go of the day. Set down your thoughts. There's nothing left to do. But listen, tonight's letter comes from a place carved into stone and skin, a path that stretches over mountains and mist, built not just with hands, but with centuries. You are about to hear the letter from the Great Wall. Let us go back in time, far beyond the bustle of modern cities and glowing screens, back to a world shaped by stone and silence, by lantern light and the rhythm of footsteps echoing across mountain ridges. It is the time of the Ming Dynasty in the great sweep of China. The sky is vast, open, and heavy with stars. The mountains roll like waves beneath the moon, and across them winds a colossal thread of stone, the Great Wall. Not a single wall, but many, joined and rebuilt over centuries. It bends with the land, disappears into forests, reappears along jagged cliffs. It is part defense, part legend, part heartbeat of an empire. Tonight's letter comes from a man who lives upon this wall. His name is Lian Shu, a sentry, a quiet soul, one of thousands who kept watch by day and by night, not for glory, but because it was asked of them. Lian is not a general or a poet. He does not dream of conquest. He does not seek praise. But in his quiet moments with ink and brush, he writes, by candlelight, on worn parchment, letters he may never send. Letters for those he misses, and for those who may never know him. Letters for the wind, for the stars, for the kind silence of the mountains. This letter, the one we read tonight, was written on a still evening in early autumn. The air was crisp. The moon was large and amber, resting low above the ridges. The watchtower where Lian stood was carved of gray stone with slits for arrows and lantern hooks rusted from the rain. He had just come off his patrol. His feet ached, his hands were rough, but his heart was full of thoughts, and so he wrote. He begins not with battle or command, but with the quiet things. Tonight the sky was clear. The kind of clear you only get in places where nothing stands taller than the mountains. The stars looked close enough to touch. I stood there for some time before returning to the tower. I didn't say much to the others. We often don't. We nod, we pour tea, we sit near the brazier. Words aren't needed here. The wind speaks more than we do. My shift ended late. I walked the parapet in silence, brushing my hand along the cold stone as I went. I like to do that. It reminds me that the wall is real, that it holds me, that I am part of it, just as the ivy and the bricks and the lanterns are. Lian lives a life most would call lonely, but he does not think of it that way. To him, solitude is a kind of quiet companionship. He listens to the wind in the cracks. He follows the way clouds slide over distant peaks. He makes tea from mountain herbs and uses the same chipped bowl every morning. He sharpens his spear with the same stone his father once used. He reads the same poems over and over, not because he has no others, but because each time they sound different beneath the stars. He was born in a village far to the south, in a valley filled with water wheels and persimmon trees. He remembers the taste of warm rice cakes, the sound of frogs in the paddies. He left when he was just 15, called to serve. That was many years ago. He does not regret it. In his letter, he speaks of the wall not as a duty, but as a kind of friend. There is something about being so high up that you forget the world below. The wall is not just a border, it is a path through clouds, a place where birds rest, where dreams drift. Sometimes I think the wall is dreaming too. I can feel it breathing beneath me. Lian does not fear invasion. In truth, there is little threat in these days. His post is more ceremonial than strategic. The days are quiet, the weeks long, but he finds beauty in the repetition. Every morning he walks the same section of the wall. He greets the same stone lion statue. He refills the same lanterns with oil. He writes in a journal made of bamboo slats tied with twine. Sometimes he carves small animals from wood to give to passing travelers. There is one traveler he writes of often, a peddler woman who visits once a season. She brings candied ginger and stories from the south. She smiles with her eyes. She never stays long, but always leaves behind a bit of color in the gray stone world. In this letter, he mentions her for the first time. She asked me today why I stay, why I don't return home. I told her the wall has become my home. She laughed, said that was sad, but it didn't feel sad when I said it. It still doesn't. As we listen to his words, we begin to understand. This is not just a record of a guard's life. It is a meditation on stillness, on duty without recognition, on the small rituals that become sacred, on the comfort of stone beneath tired hands. Lian's letter is not filled with excitement or drama. It is filled with moonlight and mist in the soft scraping of boots on stone. It is filled with the feeling of wrapping a blanket tighter around your shoulders, with the way time slows when you watch a lantern flicker in the dark. Tonight, his voice comes to us across centuries, not to teach or to impress, but to share a little piece of quiet, to remind us that even in the most distant places, someone once looked at the stars and thought of home. And in that moment, in that thought, we are not so different from him. We will now begin the letter. The day slips away slowly in these mountains. It does not vanish. It fades like breath against a window, dissolving into the cold. The shadows grow first along the base of the wall, then stretch, unhurried, across the stones. The air shifts, just slightly, and with it comes the smell of dry grass, of pine bark, of the day cooling into night. This is the hour Lian Shu knows best, the hour that neither belongs to light nor dark, when the stars are still unsure of themselves, and the wind begins to remember the stories it has carried. He stands at the edge of the tower, a worn ledge facing west, where the wall dips and bends over the spine of the mountain. His boots rest on ancient stone, cracked and smoothed by time. A long rope dangles from a hook above him, frayed at the edges, its fibers dark with years of use. Attached to it, hanging just above his shoulder, is the Western lantern. It is a simple thing. Iron-framed, hand-blown glass, dented in places. The oil chamber is small, barely enough to last the night. The wick curls slightly, already stained from nights before. He lights it as he always does, slowly, without speaking. One hand on the base, the other cupping the small match. The flame flickers at first, a brief protest, then blooms into gold, rising up the wick like a breath. The lantern glows. The light reaches across the wall, casting soft, flickering shapes along the tower's stones. The shadows move gently, stretching long and thin before curling into corners. The ritual is always the same. The stillness, the silence, the quiet act of lighting this single lantern. No one watches him do it. No command requires it. And yet, it is the moment that begins every night. He lowers the lantern slightly and lets it sway once, a small arc in the mountain wind, before securing it against the hook. The wind here is patient. It comes in waves, not gusts. Tonight it carries the scent of dry leaves and cooling earth. It tugs at his robe, rustles the loose ends of rope along the wall. He stays still, not waiting, just being. Behind him, the brazier has already been lit. Inside the tower, the orange glow of coals warms the air just enough to make it livable. A kettle sits near the heat. Faintly, a chipped clay bowl waits beside it, with tea leaves crushed from the last harvest. Not fresh, but comforting. He doesn't go in yet. The lantern has caught his full attention. Its light is steady now, bright but soft. It paints the old mortar with warmth. It glints off the iron hinges and casts a golden stripe along the base of the parapet where moss grows in summer. This part of the wall is old. Older than him, older than the emperor. The stones are etched with lichen in time. Some of the carvings are worn beyond meaning, but he likes them that way. They remind him that he is not the first, nor will he be the last. Somewhere beneath the foundation, there are still ashes from the first fires built here. He sometimes imagines their smoke still lingering in the cracks. He runs a hand along the stone, slowly. His fingertips trace a familiar path, a chip he once made with his spear, a rough patch where the mortar never settled right, a faint groove where water trickles after rain. These are the marks of years, not war, not history, just presence. He exhales. The warmth of the tea kettle behind him is starting to call. But still he lingers by the lantern, watching it work, watching the way it pushes darkness gently away. Not to banish it, but to soften its edge. That's all he's ever really wanted. Not to fight the dark, just to make space for light to exist inside it. When he finally steps back inside, the air is warmer. The stone walls drink the lantern light like old friends. The brazier flickers and hisses. He pours the tea without rushing. It smells of mountain mint and roasted bark. Bitterness first, then earth, then sweetness if you wait long enough. He takes it outside, holding the bowl between both hands. The clay is warm against his skin. He leans against the doorway, one shoulder brushing the stone. Above, the sky has begun to bloom. First stars, cautious, scattered. Then more, bolder, pulsing like heartbeats. The moon is not yet risen, but its light already curls along the horizon like a secret waiting to be told. He sips slowly. The tea is too hot at first, but he lets it linger in his mouth. The taste, the heat, the breath it slows. This is a moment he would never write about. It is too small, too quiet, and yet it is everything. He watches a single moth drift toward the lantern. Its wings catch the glow, soft, dusted with shadow. It circles once, then vanishes into the dark. Nothing disturbs the silence. Even the wind has paused. He finishes the tea, sets the bowl down beside the door, and before returning inside, he gives the lantern one last look. It sways again, barely, a whisper of gold in the deepening night. And so the evening begins, with warmth, with stillness, with flame. The wall breathes, not with lungs, not with wind, but with memory. Each night after lighting the lantern, Lian walks, always the same path, a stretch of wall carved across a ridgeline where the trees fall away and the wind moves more freely. Some nights he walks far, some only a little, but always he moves with the stone. He carries no torch. The stars and the moon, if it's kind, are enough. The lantern's glow fades behind him after the first few turns. Then it's just him, the wall, and the dark. His boots strike the ancient bricks with the same sound they always have. Soft, steady, worn in. One step after another, he doesn't rush. There is no need. The patrol is not for safety. It is for rhythm, for remembrance, to walk the walls, to fall into its breath. Each stretch is different. Some places are narrow, walls crumbling at the edge, where lichen creeps up the sides like old lace. Other places widen into brief plazas, where soldiers once stood in lines, where supplies once gathered, where banners once snapped in the wind. Now only silence remains, and Lian, walking slowly, feeling the way the wall shifts beneath him, not crumbling, just settling, like an old friend finding a better way to sit. The parapet rises to his left. Beyond it, open sky, a cliff, and far below, the black outlines of pine and stone. To his right, the inner wall curves with the slope, its edge chipped, some parts hollowed by time and water. He runs his hand along it as he walks. The stone is cool, slightly damp, alive in its own way. He does not need to think about where he is going. He knows each bend by heart. The leaning guardhouse with the broken roof, the crooked stair near the hollow where birds nest in spring, the half-buried drum tower where a sapling has taken root. Each is like a bead on a necklace, a point in the loop of his walk, his world. In one corner, sheltered from the wind, he finds a smooth stone ledge, his resting place. He always stops here. The view is one. The wall stretches ahead like a ribbon unraveling into moonlight. Behind him, it winds backward into mist, its tail vanishing where the lantern still burns. He sits. No words, no reason, just a pause. The stars above him are thick now, scattered across the sky like spilled flour. They shift slightly as the night deepens, but he doesn't look for patterns. He lets them exist without needing to explain them. The wall beneath him exhales, not truly, but almost. A long, low groan from deep inside, stone adjusting to cold, or maybe to age. He hears it often. It does not scare him. He likes to imagine the wall is alive, that it remembers every footfall, every moment of fear, every laugh that echoed from tower to tower. And tonight he's the only one awake to hear it breathing. The wind returns, brushing over the ridge with a softer voice. It tugs at his sleeves, curls through his hair. He closes his eyes and listens. There is something about being high above the world, with only stars for company, that makes everything feel lighter, as though the things that trouble the mind down below cannot climb this far. He feels no weight in this moment, no ache, no hunger, no need, just breath and stone and ski. A sound interrupts the stillness, distant, faint, maybe real, maybe not. It could be an animal far down in the valley, a fox perhaps, or the cry of a night bird. He opens his eyes slowly, letting them adjust again. Nothing moves. The stars haven't shifted. The wall remains. It is enough. He rises and continues walking. Each step feels heavier now, not from exhaustion, but from presence, from the way this place invites stillness with every pace. He knows he'll remember this walk, even though he has walked it 100 times. Maybe because tonight it feels like the wall remembers him back. Before returning to the tower, he pauses again, his hand resting on the same patch of stone he always touches, worn smooth over the years by his own skin. He doesn't know why he does it. He only knows it feels right, like bowing before entering a room, like leaving a lantern lit, like saying goodnight even when no one hears. He lingers a few seconds more, feeling the breath of stone beneath his palm and the hush of night all around him. Then he turns and begins the walk home. The season has changed. Lian notices it in the wind first. It no longer whispers. It sighs, cooler, clearer, carrying the scent of dry grass and fading leaves from valleys below. Then in the trees, what few there are along the mountain ridge, their edges crisp with golden orange, the branches lighter with every passing day. Some leaves gather on the wall itself, swept into corners, caught between stones. Autumn has always been Lian's favorite season. The world softens somehow, becomes quieter but not empty. Everything feels like it's preparing to rest. That morning, long before the sun warmed the stone, he sensed it would be today. The day she returns. She is not expected. She never is. But once each season, the peddler woman makes her way along the wall. No caravan, no guards, no horse. Just a pack on her back and a scarf around her head. And always a laugh waiting at the corner of her mouth. She sells small things. Cloth from the south, dried citrus, iron trinkets, and sweets wrapped in paper that smells faintly of jasmine. But more than that, she brings something rarer, new stories. Lian first saw her 5 years ago on a foggy morning when the mist barely lifted from the parapets. He thought she was a ghost at first, a trick of the light. But she smiled, greeted him in a soft northern dialect, and offered him candied ginger in exchange for warm tea. She has visited ever since, not regularly, not predictably, but always just as the leaves begin to fall. She arrives near noon, wrapped in a blue cloak patched at the shoulders, her boots caked with dust. She carries more this time, an extra satchel across her chest. Lian greets her with a nod. Words are few at first. They never rush. He pours the tea. She unwraps something from her bag, 2 preserved plums in oiled paper. They sit on the edge of the wall and watch the clouds move. They speak of little things, what the rains were like in the lowlands this year, which roads have collapsed, which markets are still open. And then, as always, she asks her quiet question. Why do you stay here, Lian Shu? He does not answer right away. He never does. Instead, he asks if she's heard the legend of the stones. She shakes her head, half smiling. She knows it's not a trade. It's a story. He tells her, long ago when the earliest sections of the wall were built, as early as the 7th century BCE, some believed that each stone carried a memory, that when a worker placed a stone with both hands and a true heart, part of his spirit stayed inside it. And if the wall ever fell, those memories would return to the earth, not lost, but absorbed. Later, during the Ming Dynasty, the time of Lian's own post, stone and brick replaced rammed earth. Construction became more exacting, more dangerous. It's said that over 1 million people died building the wall. Many were conscripted laborers, prisoners, or peasants. Some were never buried, they were laid into the wall itself, their bones sealed inside, turned into part of the stone. A grave that stretches for thousands of miles. The woman grows quiet at that, not disturbed, but thoughtful. She runs a thumb across the edge of the wall where the stone is rougher, unfinished. "Do you think that's true?" she asks. Lian shrugs. "Some truths are not about facts. They're about how something makes you feel." And the wall does feel alive, especially at night, when the wind speaks through the cracks and the stones creak with the weight of silence. Later, she leaves a package behind, as she always does. A few squares of dried persimmon, a paper talisman painted with a red seal, and a new brush. Lian finds it tucked near the brazier when he returns to the tower. He unwraps the brush slowly. The handle is carved from bamboo, polished smooth. The bristles, a fine blend of goat hair, feel soft against his thumb. He holds it up to the lantern. The flame glints along the lacquered wood. No note, she never leaves one. But he understands the message. That night, he walks the wall again. The stars are clear, the wind softer. He carries the brush in his sleeve, as if the memory of her visit lingers in its weight. He thinks of the things she said, of the names of places he has never seen. The southern provinces, the rivers so wide that ferries take hours to cross, cities where the walls do not keep people out, but in. He wonders what it's like to walk without a path, to carry only what you need, to have no post, no place to return to. And still, he doesn't envy her. The wall is not a prison, not to him. It is a rhythm, a song sung so softly you only hear it when you stay long enough. He thinks of her footsteps fading down the mountain path, the sound of her laughter once, years ago, echoing off the tower. Some things do not need to be held to be remembered. When he returns to the Watchtower, he lights the lantern again. Not because it is dark, but because it has become a way to say, "Someone was here, and I remember." There are some nights when everything goes still. No wind, no sounds, no shifting clouds, just stillness, layered on stillness. This was one of those nights. Lian Shu stood in the highest corner of the wall's watchtower, where the view opened to both the north and the south. He had climbed there out of habit, not intention, a small movement, like a sigh taken without thinking. The steps were cold under his feet. The bricks radiated back the last warmth of the day in long, slow waves. Above him, the stars had gathered thick and close, like quiet watchers. The air did not move, not a whisper, not even the smallest stir. His robe, usually pulled tight by mountain breezes, hung untouched. The trees in the valley below stood like painted things. Even the distant river, so faint he could rarely hear it, had fallen silent. This kind of quiet doesn't happen often. There's always something, a hawk's call, a gust of wind, the low creak of a shutter, the murmur of wood adjusting to cold. But tonight, nothing. It was the kind of silence that made you feel like you were floating. Not in the sky, not in the mind, but in a time. He sat on the edge of the stone, feet folded under him, shoulders drawn close, and simply watched. The moon rose slowly, massive and golden. It wasn't bright, not piercing or sharp, but wide, radiant, glowing like a lantern held in a steady hand. Its light stretched along the ridgeline, and the great wall beneath it looked like a river made of bone, pale, winding, ancient, a thing that didn't divide the land, but marked it, a seam across the earth, a sentence without end. He thought of something one of the passing scholars once told him, that the Great Wall, when measured through all its branches and sections, stretched over 21,000 kilometers. Lian tried to imagine it, a single wall, uninterrupted, folding over deserts, plains, rivers, cliffs. He imagined walking it, a life's journey, Perhaps, too, he imagined who he might become by the end of such a path. But then he thought of his single stretch, this portion here on the mountain shoulder, and felt no lack, because he had walked this same path so many times that it had become more than a place. It was a presence. The stillness pressed gently around him, not heavy, but full, like the air before snow, like the pause between one breath and the next. It made him think of something older than the wall, older than emperors, older than written records and carved names. It made him think of sky, of silence before language, of a time when all things were simply quiet. He closed his eyes, not to sleep, not yet, but to listen deeper, to the rhythm behind silence. He had come to believe that the wall had its own heartbeat. You couldn't hear it in the day. Too much movement, too many tasks. But at night, nights like this, you could feel it, just under the stone. A kind of slow hum, like mountains thinking. There's an old belief, passed among the older guards and the stonemasons, that the wall contains a spirit. Not a ghost, not a person, but a soul. Some say it is the soul of those who built it. Others say it's the land itself, shaped into line and length, made solid through time. Lian didn't try to define it, but he had spoken to the wall before, in his own way, sometimes aloud, sometimes only in his chest, when the silence was too big to keep inside. He opened his eyes again. The stars hadn't moved, but somehow the night felt deeper. There was something sacred in this motionless hour, a clarity that only stillness brings. The kind of moment where a single breath becomes a form of prayer. He let his hand rest against the cold wall beside him, his palm flat against the stone. The wall didn't answer, not in words, but in presence, in gravity, in the way it held. And for the first time in a while, he let himself wonder, what would it feel like to leave, to walk down the mountain and not return, to follow the woman's trail south, to live among people again, to barter and laugh and sleep without stone at his back? The thought didn't hurt, but it felt distant, like remembering someone else's dream, because the wall didn't bind him. It didn't trap or demand. It simply stood and offered him a place to belong, a place to be small. He had come to cherish that feeling of being small, not unimportant, just not everything. In a world of constant striving, he had found comfort in the opposite. He was not a builder, not a hero, not even needed nowadays. But he was present, and to him, that was enough. A hawk cried once, far off, then fell quiet again. Lin rose slowly, joints creaking softly. He rolled his shoulders beneath the robe and looked once more at the path behind him. The tower glowed faintly from the lantern. Its small light barely reached the first curve of the wall. He smiled. The stillness had passed, not broken, just eased, as if the world had taken a breath and now was ready to exhale. He walked back with slow steps, his fingers brushing the top of the wall, stone rough and real beneath his touch. And just before reaching the tower, he whispered, not to himself but to the quiet, "Thank you for the silence." The night grows old, the kind of old that doesn't show its age, but carries it quietly like dust on a scroll or salt in the sea air. The moon has shifted west, casting long shadows across the stones. The stars, once vivid and sharp, have begun to blur at the edges. Morning is still far, but not unreachable. Lian sits inside the tower now, by the brazier, where the heat rises in slow, sleepy breaths. The lantern still burns outside, its glow flickering across the inner wall through a narrow window. His tea is long finished. The brush rests in his hand. He stares at the blank parchment on the table, not out of hesitation, but reverence. Some nights the words come quickly. Tonight they wait. He doesn't write to anyone specific. There is no name at the top, no address, no date, just the quiet sense that somewhere this letter might reach someone, someday. And if it does, he wants it to feel like a gift. He dips the brush into the ink, a mixture of soot and pine oil, and begins not with facts, but with feeling. Not the kind that demands attention, but the kind that waits patiently in silence. He writes slowly, deliberately, each stroke full of breath. He writes of light, not the sun, but lantern light, the way it holds the edges of the dark without banishing it. He writes of walking along the wall, boots brushing leaves, stone rising up like an old friend beneath each step. He writes of stillness in what it teaches. He pauses often, not to think, but to listen. The fire snaps quietly in the brazier. A piece of wood collapses inward with a soft sigh. He glances out the window and sees the lantern sway gently. The wind has returned, light and aimless. He turns back to the parchment and continues. To the one who finds this, he writes, I do not know your name. I do not know your time, your place, your face. But I know what silence feels like. I know what it means to sit in the dark and not be afraid to eat. He doesn't explain who he is, not yet. He lets the mood speak first. Outside, the night deepens into that final stillness before dawn. The air thins. The world holds its breath. He writes of the seasons, of how the mountains smell different in spring, and how snow drapes the wall like a soft cloak in winter. He writes of routine not as boredom, but as meaning, as a ritual that builds a life, one gesture at a time. He writes of the peddler woman without naming her, just a presence, a visitor in autumn, a reminder that warmth can arrive quietly without asking anything in return. I have learned, he writes, that presence is more important than noise, that to be here, truly here, is sometimes the most honest form of living. He doesn't know if anyone will ever read these words, but that's not the point. The letter is not a message, it is a practice, a way to place himself into the world, to leave a trace, to fold a piece of stillness into paper, and trust that someday someone might unfold it and feel less alone. He stops for a while, brush raised, ink slowly thickening at the tip. His eyes grow heavy, not from exhaustion, but from peace. He stretches his legs beneath the table and leans back, letting the brush rest in its dish. The fire in the brazier has faded now, nothing left but a warm glow and a bed of soft ash. He lets the silence stretch again. If you are reading this, he writes finally, may you feel what I feel now, the comfort of the quiet, the strength of still things, the gentle truth that you do not need to be seen to be real. No signature, just the final breath of ink on paper, a moment paused in time. He places the letter aside to dry, careful not to smudge the corners. Then he folds his hands in his lap and listens to the world breathing around him. Somewhere beyond the tower, the stars are beginning to pull away. The moon softens. The east grows the faintest shade lighter. But here, inside, the quiet holds firm. He does not sleep yet, not quite. He simply sits. And in the stillness, the letter glows faintly beside him, its words cooling like embered wood. The letter is finished. The ink has dried. Its final words sit quietly in the corner of the parchment, not rushed, not reaching, just resting. Lian folds the paper gently, creases it only once, and sets it aside. There is no seal, no need. If it reaches someone, it will. If it doesn't, it has still done its work. The room is nearly dark now. The brazier has cooled to a soft red glow. The shadows no longer flicker. They lie still. Outside, the wind has softened again. Not still, just quieter. Like it too is preparing to rest. Lian stands slowly, his limbs a little heavier with the weight of the night. He walks to the narrow door at the rear of the tower and steps out once more onto the wall. The western lantern still burns. Its flame has grown smaller, a curl of orange light just barely holding its shape. It sways a little in the breeze, casting a moving shimmer across the stones. Faint, flickering, beautiful. He watches it for a long moment. Not to tend it, not to fix or adjust, just to witness, to say goodbye for the night. The flame is still here, he thinks. That is enough. He breathes in deeply. The coolness of the mountain, the dry scent of rock and moss, the faintest edge of pine. It fills him, not just his lungs, but something quieter, something deeper. He turns and looks out across the land. The ridgeline rolls away in folds, lit only by starlight now. He imagines the wall continuing on past where he can see, rising, dipping, winding like a long thought that never ends. Not a barrier, not a monument, just a breath held across centuries. And he, just one heartbeat inside it. He returns to the room slowly. There is no urgency. Everything is done. The tea bowl has cooled. The scrolls are stacked. The letter waits on the table, folded like a leaf ready to fall. He places the brush back in its box, slides the lid closed, wipes his fingers with a cloth, worn soft from many nights just like this. Then he unrolls his blanket, lays it near the wall where the stone holds a little of the day's warmth. He sits, crosses his legs, and lets his hands rest on his knees, eyes closed. No words, no thoughts, only breath. The silence is complete now. Even the wind seems to understand that it has done enough. Lian leans slowly onto his side, wraps the blanket around his shoulders, and rests his head on the folded robe beneath him. The lantern outside flickers one last time, a quiet farewell. He thinks just briefly of the letter, not of its words, but of what it means, of offering a moment to someone he will never meet, of letting the stillness speak across time. He thinks, I have done my part. And then he lets go of the day. The stars remain above, steadfast and blinking. The wall too rests, still breathing, still listening. And Lian Shu, alone but not lonely, falls gently, quietly, into sleep. The tower's quiet now. The lantern has dimmed. The wall is resting. And so are you. Let the breath come slower now. There's nothing to do, no place to be. Let your body grow heavy, like the stones along the wall, strong, grounded, unhurried. Let your mind be light, like the stars above, distant, drifting, at ease. Breathe in, a soft wind through pine trees. Breathe out, the bay fading into dusk. You are safe here, you are held, you are not alone. The world is still but not empty. It waits with you, beside you, around you. You are part of something older than worry, something softer than time. something that asks nothing but offers everything. Rest now, dreamer. You've walked far, you've lit the lantern, you've kept watch, and now you may sleep. Let the thoughts drift, let the silence deepen, let the quiet carry you. Like the letter from the Watchtower, your breath moves gently through the night, across the mountains into peace. Everything is calm, everything is slow, everything is enough. Good night.